because younger people have the skills to create the things. It's just that the audience is different. Now, so that's a challenge, but the good news that I bring today is that business gets this. And so you're not actually hitting against a brick wall anymore. You're actually dealing with an industry, especially in technology, where people are sort of going, good businesses get it, the human behavior thing. They get the fact that we've got to go out and understand the customer better, because the companies that do, the Apples of this world, do very well, and the companies that don't do well. So there's a bit of a message of hope for you guys and for everybody, that actually, although younger people build the offers, you decide what sells. Now, the other thing that business is beginning to understand, there's a whole behavior revolution happening out there. And all of these things that you're talking about, these little things, are actually being understood now by business. And when I started out as a designer, it was kind of all about price and features, and you'd really have to beat people up to get them to think about, the rich complexity of people. Whereas now, it's generally understood that, for example, about 11 million pieces of information are absorbed by each one of us every instant. And only 40 of those are conscious. So this old business of, oh, she's irrational and he's rational, is nonsense. We all have a sort of conscious decision-making layer and then a massive intuitive decision-making layer. And so this business of making things easy and simple is actually all about understanding how you connect and how people experience things. So that's really what I'm going to be talking about. We always assign meaning to things, okay? Our brains go around all the time, and it's why we kick the tires when we're trying to decide whether or not a car company is any good. That's just how we think, and people are beginning to understand and respect this a little bit more. The other thing that's understood that makes things challenging for older consumers is that those intuitions that we have are formed when we're younger. And so if you've grown up in an era where you turn a knob to make something happen, or you push a button to make something happen, it's actually quite a big adjustment to be kind of clicking with a mouse onto a menu and find something buried underneath. So anybody who actually wants to make life easy and simple for you has got to actually respect your journey and where you're coming from. So I'm going to come back and describe how we sort of do some of that. But this isn't a problem that's unique to old people. At the Alloway, we reckon about 10 million people every day use stuff that we've designed, okay? So we're very much mainstream, mass market. We do innovation for Samsung, do BT stuff, we do hubs. And we also, for example, our designers who are childless create stuff for young mothers, okay? We design tools for surgeons to use. We design broadcast cameras, even though we're not in professional broadcast. And so in modern design, being empathic to people not like you is baseline professional competency now. A lot of the challenges that people were referring to are, designers creating stuff for themselves, they're dead meat if they do that. They won't get a job. They won't last long in a job. The game is moved on, okay? And so a lot of the experience that I'm going to be talking about now goes back to, I designed, when I was young, and I was about 32, I designed one of the most successful inclusive products ever. In fact, it's often referenced as one of the original case studies of what's known as inclusive design, i.e. design for old people that proved to be a big mass market success. So it is possible, and I'm going to explain to you in a minute the sort of techniques that we use to actually do it. And I'll never forget, it was a product manager kind of going, look, I have to do this phone. Can you try and do it so that I'll sell more than a few thousand of them? And we found out how to do that. And today, brands like BT, inclusive is box office for BT. This is a phone called the Freestyle 700. It's one of the top 5 best-selling phones in the country. It's got big buttons, it's got big screens, it's got all of the things that people used to say we couldn't put on a phone and sell it to the mass market. And that's just not true. If you design things well, that are easy to use, a lot of people will buy them. And so a lot of what older people are dealing with is actually just bad stuff. You know, I've been in the technology business for 25 years, since Clive, darling Clive, back in the 80s. And it is full of people who underestimate human nature and do things badly. And you know, that's changing and not good enough. But it's really important to understand, we're going to be talking about how you empathize with people not like you. But it's very important that you're kind of informed by people not like you. So when our young designers work with older people, it's really important that you're kind of inspired. It's a bit like Emma's point about your auntie. You know, it's really important to get designers immersed in a user environment to understand what it's like and form their own impressions. You know, there's a wonderful thing that someone said this morning that I use a lot, which is that old age is something that just kind of happens. You know, there are all kinds of perspective on what aging means, and it's, once you get people to understand, and I say this a lot to people, you know, look, just imagine that your eyesight was going a bit, you were a bit stiffer in your joints and a bit more forgetful, you know, and take it from there, and we can move on. But we do a lot of work, whether it's young moms or old ladies. You've got to get the designers out in the environment, because you can't just ask people and tick a box. You know, Henry Ford once famously said, if I asked people what they'd wanted, they would have just said faster horses. Okay, so one of the challenges here is you can't be completely led by the user, because the user doesn't necessarily know what could be done. So someone's got to close the loop, and this is what companies like Apple do marvelously, which is they just respect the richness. You just respect the people you're trying to help, but ultimately you're the expert because you know what's available and what might be done. So it's about getting the balance between those two forces. And it means doing things like avoiding dumb generalizations. You know, one of my favorite ones is, look, I'm 52. My mother's 85, so we're both over 50. So don't put us in the same box. You know, we have completely different instincts. And remember my point earlier about how old, you know, the different instincts being formed young in life. We use the segmentation model a lot, you know, but so I tend to talk about Generation Miller, you know, that was kind of in its teens around the post-war time that might be into Glenn Miller, you know. And then you've got a post-war that's kind of into Elvis, and then 65 people retiring are actually into the Rolling Stones. You know, the stereotypes of who is old are completely being blown out of the water. And, you know, I'm Sex Pistols, punk, all that stuff, you know. And so our instincts when it comes to how we interact with information, completely different. So you can't, there's no such thing as old people, you know, as a single homogeneous lump. Even if old people were being addressed and targeted by a product, you'd have to look at those different life ages and actually address different things within that. And also, the issues that we're dealing with are very complicated. I'm doing work, Robert here was describing Dallas this morning, this big project in the UK, and I'm involved with it in terms of setting interoperability. And this is the world of assisted living. So you're not just dealing with the user, you're dealing with the whole healthcare system. You're dealing with, oops, I lost my focus. You're dealing with the professional healthcare world. You're dealing with the families and the communities and all these things. It's a very, very complicated world. So how do you make sense of all of this? So I'm going to just use a case study here of a startup that we're doing called Well Together. That we've done with a Norwegian software company. We were hired by them to actually do the service design and the UX design of what is effectively a connected service system for assisted living. So what it is a tablet connected to a care management portal with an ability for friends and family to actually connect into it. So right away, you see the world's getting complicated. Okay? You don't just design devices anymore. You don't just design software anymore. You actually design the way different devices in different places all come together to actually create a service. So it's a very, very complicated challenge. So the approach is the one of basically being inspired by human insight and letting that drive the process. So the way we ran the project was to say, okay, this whole assisted living thing, people are doing a lot of stuff, it's not working. Let's really talk to the people involved. Let's understand the user. Let's connect with them and understand all the stakeholders. And so we use a variety of techniques to do that. And the first one is obviously one-to-one interviews. But remember my point about Henry Ford. You can't just, the conversations can be quite difficult. You can't just go along and say, what would you like? Because most of the people you're talking to would say, we're quite happy, thank you very much. We don't need technology. Nobody needs technology. People need answers to unmet needs that they have. So we have some, like one of my favorite leading questions when we're doing one-to-one interviews is, if you had a magic wand to make your life better, what would you do with it? And as a question, it takes you into some very, very interesting places. And we asked a lot of magic wand questions. And then we worked not just with the users, but with a number of care home operators to actually understand what it was like from their perspective as well. Because it's not just about the service users, it's about the other people in the equation, the carers. And then we use a lot of techniques that are very similar to producing a movie or a play. We build a cast of characters. And you do this so that the designers can talk about being in character or out of character. So in the assisted living world, you've got service users, you've got care professionals, you've got friends and family, and you've got health professionals, all with different interests. And actually then, when you look at the service users, everybody's an individual. And one of the big problems that we found with a lot of systems was that everybody was being treated, or the people were building systems for a single condition. So two people might need two different tests or two different kinds of things. So you had to look at a variety of conditions and situations that people might have. And we built a series of personas around them. And then you go into the detail in the persona. And so as you're doing the research, what you're actually doing is you're building the character and the plot line for the play. And you're describing and you talk about Arthur. And you talk about what it's like to be Arthur. And you're getting these young designers who aren't Arthur to think about what it's like to be Arthur. And you build this composite character. And when you do it in this way, you start building a play. And so what kind of emerged from this research and these conversations was we weren't quite sure what we were doing, but what we knew was that people wanted to interact with a tablet-y thing, and they might want the family connected in, and there might be some health, and there might be some carers. So we were sort of beginning to form and design our service by kind of understanding who might be doing what in this thing. So, a daughter might want to stay in touch with her mother. A grandson with their grandparent. A GP with a patient and trying to figure out where's all this going. One of the other tools that we use a lot of is, what are the intuitive associations that matter? We talked about how your instincts are formed earlier. So what is it about a village that's nice? When people throw technology at old people, or even my age, I don't think of myself as old at 52. Facebook, what's that all about? How can you have 1,000 friends? I'm sorry, but that's not a friend, So technology can try and impose structures on older people, and frankly on younger people that are very untested and that people can reject. So things like mail, these are all nice, comfortable things that you might actually want to interact with. Another technique that we use a lot is role play. We've been involved working with Cambridge on building and helping them design tools that help to simulate some of the impairments of being old, the physical stuff. Just joints that don't move quite so much, eyes that don't see quite as much. And you give young designers those goggles and the gloves. We don't design anything without putting the gloves on. And getting the designers to not just think about their Auntie Mary or their mum, but to actually really get in role and understand what it's like. And you do a lot of planning. You're not just designing objects anymore. You're planning a play, a choreography. You're doing a lot of storyboarding. That's what it's about now. And you test stuff early. Remember I said, how everything that we see and touch with actually influences our decisions. So the problem with that is it's really hard to predict, but the good news is you can show people things early. So the techniques that are used in design nowadays by the people who get it and the good companies are all about showing users stuff really early so that you can actually say, no, that's rubbish. I don't like that. Change it. There's a tendency to show people stuff late after it's been engineered, and it's like, ooh, I don't like the look of that, but it's too late because I've just spent £1 million developing it. You can show people a piece of paper 2 weeks into the project and say, do you want the screen to be that big or that big? And you show them what's on it, and they go, no, I don't fancy that. I'll try that. So you can engage very, very early with people, and you learn a lot. We did about 7-8 rounds of research really early on in the project. And it's little things like, for a generation of people over about 70, they're very uncomfortable with the idea that if you push a button, you instantaneously go from seeing one thing on a screen to seeing something else. Because there aren't many instantaneous things in the world they grew up in. So where we have links, we have arrows. And after you push the link, you don't immediately jump to something else. It sort of goes whoosh. So you have this feeling of either turning a page or just movement from one place to another. And we just found those little details made users feel so much more comfortable and engaged in the process. So we use that to develop things, work our way through, we test, and we iterate, and we work our way around, and we focus on different directions, and we refine them, all the while actually working with users. Again and again, and the scenarios get more precise, and they get more involved, and there's a huge amount of work, hundreds of these scenarios that go into actually planning the thing. And then you end up with, this is what we've kind of ended up with, and very high contrast displays, nice transitions, and then a suite of tools, one designed for care managers, one designed for friends and family. And what you end up with is an approach where, what we found, for example, is that if you're going to give technology to people who aren't really interested in technology, you can't really ask them to learn stuff. So we've got a system that relies a lot on push. You can just put it in the room, and other people can send stuff. So if your daughter or your carer is going to send you a message, it should just appear, because your mail just appears. Why should it be any more complicated than that? It doesn't need to be. That's the point. So you can kind of put your foot down and say, look, I don't want logins and complicated stuff. I just want this stuff to happen. And it can. It's got a calendar. But the interesting thing is that other people can put stuff in the calendar too. So you can build a social network. So if you've got this tablet, other people can help you. If you have a problem with the tablet, someone can immediately help you. And you have an appointment with the doctors. You don't have to put that appointment in your tablet. Your doctor can put the appointment in the tablet for you because you trust him. And that way you get to work. So you can have email and you can have messages without worrying about being hacked by the Russians and all kinds of problems that people have with email. Technology is just horrible. If a physio is coming, they can put the appointment in. Why should you? If you're going to play a poker with your friends, let it all happen. And then there's a health page. And one of the key things with systems is actually everybody's an individual. And the older you get, you've got a more complex mix of things going on. You might be taking a variety of medication. You might have a little bit of a weight issue. You might be having to manage your blood pressure or whatever. And so the idea here is that you download and you're pushed various tests and whatever you want to do in your care plan is all just pushed to you. And it just happens. And you can follow it. And you just show me the stuff, show me the trends. I can see how I'm doing. Don't do silly stuff to motivate me. You can get information from the doctor, do things like that. And obviously you can call. People can call you. Some people you have to answer and let them in the door. Others you don't. But what you do should be something that you feel comfortable with in terms of your sociology. So the metaphor of answering the door, you don't want people kind of just arriving in your home. You don't want a head just appearing on a screen out of nowhere. You might want that if you've pushed a panic button, but not all the time. So that choreography of how you manage and give people the right kind of privacy, these things can all be addressed with technology. It just needs people to actually recognize that those little details related to the sociology of the thing are the things that matter. Anybody can bounce bits around.